Welcome to the Smoke and Rope Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Basore, and today is episode 30. And we are bringing back a returning guest, Jamie Lowell. Happy to have you back, Jamie. Thanks for being on. Yep, you're on mute, Jamie. You got it. And as always, Tom Beller up in Kalkaska. Tom, good to see you.
Good to see you too. What's up, Jamie? How you guys doing?
Hey.
Doing great. Wonderful. Kevin over at Truu Cannabis. Kevin, good to see you as well today.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Glad to be on the show, man. Hope we have some good things to ask Jamie.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to have Jamie back on the show and to talk about something that's been going on, and we talk about all the time, whether it's on the phone or not, or or in person, or chatting, and just budtender training, what that looks like over 90 days from now, all the way up to 5-10 years out, and educating. But that's the big thing, and then there's some other cool stuff to talk about. Jamie's an expert about on Schedule 1 in Michigan. But Jamie was on episode 13 originally, and went into a long background with Jamie and I. We've been kind of, as far as our cannabis journeys, I wouldn't say intertwined at the hip, but did a lot of the same stuff. We met early on in 2009. I was watching the MMA chat rooms, the website, and saw Jamie yelling at people and getting after it, and he had opened up Third Coast, Ypsilanti, and I just started becoming just a student, following everything and watching who it is. And then we were members of Cannabis Patients United in 2010, and then also Michigan Association Compassion Centers. Worked. Jamie's been there with ASA, the head of Michigan ASA, MI Legalize, and then MI Legalize again with Prop 1, Dana Nessel, MMLE, and then currently Jamie is the director of advocacy for the Botanical Company, and that fits into the philosophy of talking about the plant. So Jamie, thanks for being back on. It's a pleasure always, and go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you've been up to, and let's talk about budtender training.
Sure. Well, you mentioned ASA. That Michigan chapter has reformed recently, and Brandy Zink is at the helm. I am there as a board member. Some people from our organization, Tiffany Coleman is also involved, and one of our associates from East Tawas, Penny, is involved in that. And it's coming together as a really excellent group, and we're going to be part of some educational broadcasts coming up in the next couple of months. So that chapter is back around again and is available to help people through a patient-focused kind of a philosophy, and which is in alignment with how we like to look at things after our experiences with cannabis over the years anyway. And I'm also working on the board of the Michigan Cannabis Caucus, which of course worked with Foundation and Last Prisoner Project and many others.
Left out. There's so much I left out. A couple of things. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. It's been many years and a lot of stuff going on, but there's some stuff been happening lately, and those are more directly related. And obviously a great day. Just to get off track for a second, last Thursday when Michael Thompson was released, 4:00 in the morning, and Ryan was there and I was there. Rick Thompson and others were there. Mike McCurdy, some press, and it was really profound. And it was a result of a lot of hard work and passion. And it was great to see that come together. And as we keep on saying when we talk about it, we hope that it's the first of many more to come, and that this system and this pathway has been established, and now we can use it for many other people. And Michael Thompson himself, of course, has gone right to work to try to help out with that. And he has unique understanding of what those problems are. So
yeah, that was just speaking on that real quick since we're on it. That was pretty profound. We talked about it on your show yesterday, Jazz Cabbage, but the silence when he walked out, it was there's 50, 60 people standing out there meeting, and it was just deadly silent when he came out. Everyone waited. He got, and with the snow coming down next to the barbed wire, it was pretty wild, and pretty cool. We came in, and you pull into the prison, and they come in and say, who are you, who you with? And the guards, I'm Ryan with Redemption Cannabis. And they're like, oh, okay, go ahead, go on through. And then I hear Jamie, and they're like, it's another cannabis person. And let 'em through. And
Yeah.
so it's just it's weird, you know. It's 2021, and things are different. Sorry about that, Jamie, but yeah, it
No,
was awesome.
that was really cool. It was all part of the profound leading up to the profound moment when he was let out. So he's got to deal with some probation and stuff like that. But he is outside of the actual walls of the prison, which is great. Can only imagine. I know Ryan comes the closest to kind of having an understanding of that, but that was after like 25 years. Man. So, speaking of that, and as director of advocacy, I've been involved in the advocacy activism side, political, legal, business side, just trying to maintain that balance from my perspective, and that segues into trying to effectuate a philosophy with how we work with people, and of course, being able to understand who we're working with and accommodating what they're after is a very basic concept, and also pretty simply offering up to date and useful information, and in order to do that, uh, the challenge is to deconstruct a lot of preconceived notions about what is useful information for trying to determine an effect or what to look for in a product, to use for something. So, particularly for those who are interested in learning more, who want to go down a health and wellness, kind of guidance, uh, who want to be able to home in better on, what kind of products are more consistently working for what they're trying to get out of it, and that kind of stuff. We have to be prepared to offer up the things and the information we have, and a way for people to assess for themselves how they are responding to these different things, and make those determinations. And over years, certain things have been associated with effect, and it has become very internalized by the masses and in the culture. And it's difficult to challenge such a thing when it's been such a part of the perspective of how cannabis works, and specifically the labels of sativa and indica, and the levels of THC in the product, particularly flower and concentrates. And it is a challenge, but it's also necessary. And Ryan offered up some projections of time. Where do we see this in this time and this time? And
Yeah.
it does take a long time to raise level of consciousness. And of course, our philosophy, my philosophy, so to speak, uh, is something that's going on all over the place. It's not unique, to me or what we are doing. Other places are doing it too, but in other places will come on board. But it just takes a while for that to kind of deconstruct those preconceived notions, and all people are susceptible to having those, and then to confirm them through confirmation bias over time, and it becomes very difficult to shake, and it permeates through science and all other aspects that we consider credible sources, for determining how to use cannabis. So we more discuss like the person utilizing the cannabis to first understand what the effect ultimately is. There are many components in the plant, as everybody here knows, and they go beyond the THC and CBD. There's a whole cannabinoid profile. There's a whole list of flavonoids and terpenes, and um, the idea is to take in consideration all of that information when looking at the product, and how those things, as far as plant medicine works, work synergistically together. And then when the person uses it with their own unique system, that's at the point we know what the effect is going to be. And when you try to infer like you're going to get this or that effect out of it based on it being called a sativa, an upper kind of an effect that most people associate with that, or a downer kind of in the couch effect with the indica or something like that, it's just not useful information. But it's such a part. There's like ad populum, really heavily believed things out there, but they're not necessarily true, and it's just part of our reality, part of how things work and information works. And so to try to peel that back is a challenge, but it is the truth. It is the objective truth, that those things don't have substantiation for offering good information. So we eventually will get there. And again, our angle on this, is not unique. It is happening. It's not, it's not the predominant thought yet, but we're moving in that direction.
And education and outreach is huge right now. I mean, we have a product or a plant or a medicine that's been used for, centuries really, but decades of people having a culture and understanding these things. But now that you have the population as a whole coming into the cannabis world, so to speak, not really knowing the best way to purchase, and now we have just so many people coming into stores. You have a lot of stores with COVID. They're doing curbside, so they don't get a lot of one-on-one with patients. And when I say patient, I think every human being is technically can benefit from the medicinal properties of cannabis. So even recreationally, people are still patients. But it's so important to have these conversations with people and not just read little tidbits. We struggle with this all the time, trying to explain effects. Everyone's like, what are the effects? When you have to put a description of your flower out for something, it's like, man, it's so hard to put something out there that's going to be a blanket statement. There's no blanket statement. And speaking to the whole sativa and indica thing, we personally have a super lemon haze. And typically the hazes are a sativa dominant strain, but this particular variety that we have finishes in 49 days, which is more of an indica type trait. So, we're always finding out new things, and it's important for people to kind of stop and, smell the roses, so to speak, or smell the cannabis and try and figure this out for what's best for them. And there's just not a whole lot of education happening at the retail level, which is where it really needs to happen. I mean, we can only do so much as a producer, supply information. If that information isn't being relayed, then there's just, we're just going to have a THC based purchasing masses, like everyone's drinking Everclear, that sounds great, so I don't really have a question, but
No, I agree with you. I remember years ago, I kind of also, and I understand this is human condition. I also just readily accepted a lot of the information that was coming at me. I didn't bother to look into it any further, and just accepted the sativa indica thing. And I remember being in an interview with a guy named Travis Wright, Metro Times, and he was continuously doing an article specifically on sour diesel. This was many years ago, and he determined it was one of the most popular strains around Detroit, and I remember talking in terms of, even though it's sativa, it's as strong as an indica, or something like that. And that seemed natural.
I'd love to get that.
And then I did think about it afterwards. I said, wait a second, that is completely contradicted. It makes no sense. Why should we have that? And that's kind of how it works, how the confirmation bias works. Yeah, there's an exception for this, exception for this. Oh yeah, well that one doesn't quite do it. And then when one matches up with our beliefs, we then really check it in and use that to really help confirm what we really believe on it. It's just a human way you have to really think about thinking sometimes when approaching information and determining what makes sense and what doesn't. It's real easy just to absorb it in, and that's one of the things that set me on the journey to learn more about it and really try to substantiate what we think. And of course, many of us saw anecdotally, when we were testing came out and we're involved in this culture and the business side of it and the legacy kind of times of this whole movement, and we noticed, I think, that the THC number did not really describe effect either. It could be low THC and kick your ass all over the place. It could be high THC and be kind of shitty.
Well, nor is it consistent anyway between batches. I see test results come, dozens a week, and one part, one test from the same strain, from the same harvest can test anywhere between, 0 and really 7% THC. It just all depends. It's highly variable.
Right.
And
so now you're not dealing with a reliable number anyway, and in fairness, until
right.
that was consistent, it'd be hard to really judge that. But but yeah, I agree with you. Like those numbers aren't good for helping somebody determine effect. You know, they call it, you know, dosing sometimes, or potency, and it's
Right.
just based on that, and
Right.
it's not that valuable. Although we kind of like oftentimes readily just assume that it is.
Well, we're trying to
Yeah,
quantify something, I think, to an extent, and also possibly have a level where the law enforcement may be able to use that as a some type of determining factor on,
sure. I mean,
you know.
it's also besides those two using those as tools, so to speak, for law enforcement. It also is kind of part again of the human tendency to try to like make things more black and white, less complex, you know, easier to kind of assess sooner. But there's a lot of complexities here, and the fact that we haven't been able to like be above board and have discussions and have real stuff, you know, in-depth studies and all these different things all the time, and you know, it has made it easier to just really cement those kind of misnomers, you know, about those things. So there was a recent study that came out, I think June of 2020. It's published in JAMA, and it determined that they did not find uh, that, you know, intoxication of the person with the THC levels, you know, tracks together. So, you know, it's just kind of confirming something I believe a lot of us have seen over the years. You know, that's only
Something we
one
already
part
know.
of the puzzle, and you know, and of course the discussions early on came out about the entourage effect, and hey, it's probably all of these things working together, and then with the person's unique system, and that starts making more sense. We need to like look into that a lot more, but that starts, you know, at least having more information and matching up with what we're seeing more than like relying on those other labels and things.
Well, at least deschedule it so you can study it. There's plenty of studies out there, though. I know Israel is a huge medical. They have more medical patients per capita than anywhere else in the world, and they have a lot of research. Canada, all on these types of issues with your endocannabinoid system and
Oxford
how everything
University.
fixes. Yeah,
There's universities all over the world, just not here.
it's just the U.S. is
It's starting to
Haze.
open up a little bit, but kind of too
Yeah,
little too late. Like, hey, we'll have a few more
right.
strains. We'll allow
Yeah,
Mississippi, the only place that's allowed to grow the researchable can. But there are some other efforts to try to get researchers allowed to use products that are for sale in the commercial market as a basis for research. That would make sense. Uh, Tiffany Coleman from our company putting together the lab currently is describes an app that people can get and put in information, you know, when they're using certain products to help become part of a
information, their
larger
experience.
database. Yeah, to evaluate. That's very helpful. So
Good idea.
you know, we're starting to get there, but yeah, America a little, you know, too little too late. But it doesn't mean we can't jump up to making some, you know, some better studies, more meaningful kind of approaches to this in the
It'll
future.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jamie. You know, we touched on this a little bit a couple weeks back about how with marijuana being a new industry, that the general public aren't educated about it. All the other products that you see at the store, we talked about chocolate. You know, the difference between Hershey and Godiva, or what's good and what's bad, and what's cost effective and what's more expensive, and those industries have been established for so long that people don't even question. You know, what's going on in those industries. With us, we have a brand new industry. We have to find a way to educate people. You tipped on, you know, the frontline workers with the dispensary workers. They're the obvious choice to communicate to the customers, you know, what's really going on. But I also see that there needs to be a more broader combined effort of the marijuana industry to really educate the general public. I mean, if we're relying strictly on bud tenders, then that means that somebody has to have the want to go in there and to be educated, where I feel like if people were more educated as the general public, then that would be more beneficial to the industry as a whole. I think there's a lot of information out there. I think people think that, you know, all the talk of being a gateway drug and all that other stuff defers people from even trying. But what do you see in the future? How can we get to the general public with a mass campaign to educate them on what's going on?
And this show is an example of some of the information that gets put on record and given to others, to better understand what's going on, and then to have conversations in turn with other people. They're the ASA group I just mentioned that wants to put on monthly educational programs. more and more of these things on that end of stuff will help get this information out to more people to in turn discuss it with others. That's just one thing, and that helps. That has to be happening underneath everything, and to really help solidify a new perspective, a higher consciousness, kind of, so to speak, on on this issue. But also there are these different truths as we're talking about, like the things that are believed heavily by people but aren't necessarily true, and then there is the objective truth. If you keep on pushing toward what's true, it's eventually going to rise to the top, and sometimes it takes a long time, but that, no matter what you think or feel about it or wish it to be, that is going to be the truth. And we'll find out which things hold weight over time. And right now we can reasonably say that some of these traditional ways we're looking at cannabis and trying to determine effect don't have enough weight.
Couldn't
we
the
learn from all
MRA?
the-
Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, so this is just very difficult, man. I mean, look at I'll just keep look at. I think it's in Illinois where like the laws are based around THC percentages and capping some things at certain amounts or something like that, with the belief that it has this larger influence on the entire thing. And in my perspective and in my history of dealing with cannabis, that whole thing about THC being the active ingredient and causing all these issues is a DEA talking point. I remember there was a guy, Lee Corso, from the DEA, that was going around being the the con side to our pro side at a lot of local government meetings and things like that, and saying, and cannabis contains THC, it's the active ingredient, things that get you high, and to keep on trying to make ways of making it higher and higher and breeding it this way and making concentrates, and then the kids are getting it, and that's getting and that kind of stuff. That's where I heard that from, and without substantiation then too. And you get to see it not only.
And on that point, Jamie, you just heard Governor Cuomo, New York, talking about having taxes based on how high the THC is in the bud that you sell, which is one of the weirdest, like uneducated proposals on cannabis I've ever heard.
So
other
there's an example of the challenge of changing the
DJ
consciousness.
Short's Blueberry would be back in popular demand.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, I think it's
that
interesting.
Is good stuff. That is some good stuff, by the way.
Tom had mentioned earlier he has that super lemon haze cut that finishes in 49 days and whatnot. And I think something that's important for people to understand. I've been in this industry for a long time. When I first started, I would fly over to Amsterdam and score genetics over there. And I've popped a lot of seeds through time. And I think that one of the things that I've noticed is back in the day, there was no timeline that they were racing against to breed genetics, and so they took their time and they really focused on trying to stabilize genetics and retaining the characteristics that they really liked about a plant before they moved on with those seeds. And for a lack of a better term, I feel like since the United States has exploded with cannabis, there's a huge need and want for cannabis seeds, and that has put pressure on breeders to create things faster. So they're not stabilizing genetics before they're breeding them and releasing them to the public, and so the lack of a better term is pollen chucker for those people. They're just throwing anything on anything, and saying that I've got sour diesel and I put it on this and this is the new strain. Well, when you don't go through and spend the time to figure out what you have before you breed it, you're basically calling something that it isn't. And so, to Tom's point on the super lemon haze, that particular pheno is probably taking on more of an indica domination from one of the breeding partners, and really every single seed is completely different. So to get a pack of seeds and call one thing super lemon haze and then another thing that goes 70 days is also super lemon haze, like that's another problem that we have as an industry that we need to sort out. It's a PR campaign that needs to be done because it's a problem waiting to happen. You can't go to one dispensary and get sour diesel and go to another and get sour diesel like you would with Pepsi or Coke or Mountain Dew. Like, we have to figure out a way so that patients and consumers can trust in the products that they get, and I don't know how we do that. That's another conundrum that needs to be worked out.
Well, one of the things that is going to be part of a consistent way of presenting the product will be by demonstrating the testing. And we have to rely on the process that gives us the final results of the tests in order to, accept this as a way, but it's the best information that we have. And what we would like to be able to offer, to our customers and patients who come in would be as much information about what's inside the plant as possible. The cannabinoid profile with a terpene profile and whatever's relevant to be able to offer up what's inside there to evaluate, no matter what we call it, what its name is, how long it took, anything. This is what's inside this plant, and that's better information than any of that other stuff. If we can get people to kind of look at that and use that as part of their evaluation for products, that's something that they could take then and go anywhere and know that I noticed, like, when these things show up, in the product, that I get what I want out of it, and then there's not a reliance on misnomers or marketing labels and mislabeling things, or giving something the incorrect name.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how it puts stores in a position of educating, and then obviously not everyone's been open in the lobbies with the pandemic, and when that opens back up, and it gives the retail stores a better opportunity. I know with me, I'm really enjoying the provisioning centers that are, don't ask about THC. They'll want to maybe see the COA, and they're hoping that you have the terpene profiles, on that, and they understand it, and they want to smell it and taste it and look at it. That's more important to them. So that's going along. One of the other things I hear, it's pretty nuts, is the sativa versus indica edible, and like people just labeling it like that. And I saw, and I was standing in one store, and I heard someone say that they were up from Indiana and they were confident about it, and the budtender's like, no, that's we don't have those. That's not a thing. And they didn't do any more educating on them why, but the people from Indiana were definitely sure that it was going to be a different effect. So just the fact that it's all the same distillate going in, and it's, I don't think any of these companies, maybe there's some caregivers that might, do some edibles from an actual heavy indica plant and full plant, and or so, like, that is possible, but you look at it, it's just another fake marketing ploy.
Mm-hmm.
So do companies get on board and start working and telling the truth about the products as soon as they can, and as a good way to do business and to go, to operate, or do they ride that out and try to jump on it and make some fast money? So that's kind of the dilemma I'm seeing out there, and I'm enjoying. I am seeing more stores kind of start getting more on board with the facts on that, and new people coming in that aren't the big guys, that are maybe a smaller person that's got 2 or 3, and maybe a small grow, and they're into it, and really resonating. So I'm hopeful. We'll see in the next couple of years.
Well, it could only matter if you accepted the sativa indica difference, and if it were a whole plant extraction, and then that was used in the for the infusion into the edible, then maybe, like, okay, this is a sativa based, infusion into this thing. But you have the problem of that not really meaning anything in the first place. But then you're right. It's typically an infusion based on something that was a process that took most of the THC and concentrated that into really high levels of THC, and maybe a few terpenes thrown back in. That's what it is now. But some people will still say it's from this strain, and it is an indica or a sativa on top of it. And that's misinformation again. And I think, like, when you say there's a dilemma, if once you realize that's the case, it shouldn't be much of like, am I going to market to these people who don't know any better yet, even though I know better myself, and do this, or am I going to, now that I know the difference, just lay off of that and promote the things that probably make more sense about it? And I think that's the answer, because if you don't, it's in the bigger picture, and as time goes by, it becomes pretty obvious that that's what you did. You knew better, and you tried to, like, take somebody down kind of a deceiving path in order to cash in at the moment.
Well, yeah, man.
And so
Extremely irresponsible.
And so if the philosophy is to offer the best, most up-to-date information, then you stay away from doing that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's extremely irresponsible for someone to try and sell an effect, an experience. just by this thing. And there's a lot of that going on. Like there are people selling you an experience through packaging.
Yeah.
And, people need to really be leery about those types of promises. And no matter what, if it's cannabis or anything in life, really, but when you're selling a product, you have a responsibility to your customer to be honest with them. And so, how does that apply with you and your approach at the Botanical Company?
Well, man, so that's, it's been going on ever since commercial cannabis. You have the, traditional business methods, which are, a part of, a bigger picture of having a working industry, but you also have a brand new emerging industry with a product that is very unique, that comes with it a history, a culture, a particular complex nature, as we're talking about right here. And those components have to be involved in the decision-making process in order to head in the right direction. And even then, it's brand new, and there's all types of variables involved, and to guide through. And the idea of just applying an established system, to this new thing doesn't work. And we've seen it not work for many, even huge investors. Tens of millions of dollars don't solve the problem. In fact, those people put themselves in precarious positions over not really covering that ground. I mean, one of the things I like about where I am is that the vision of Russ Chambers, who you've had on the show a few weeks ago, is to have a team and to include all those necessary components to be successful. And it's one of the reasons that I'm there, is to infuse that, this type of philosophy and cover the kind of ground that I uniquely, have to offer. So, I definitely appreciate that, and I think it's going to help us in the long run with all the attention given to all these other components, and having really excellent competent people in place for all the other necessary parts. But it's got to be a part of the equation, or else it's not going to work, because it's not a widget, it's not a traditional business thing. It's a new industry that's even forming as we go.
Yeah, there's a culture. There's definitely a culture behind it, and it's hard to understand, but it's all part of the transformation of this next decade in Michigan. Jamie, I wanted to talk about it. I consider you probably the expert on it right now in the state, as far as the situation going on with Michigan still having marijuana as a Schedule One, and not having that changed over, and the kind of just patchwork or approach that that's been going on. You've been working on it for a year and a half, and then kind of nice. Kind of back to where we started from. And for me, a quick overview of why, from my understanding, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, is like, let's say somebody has, they're allowed to have 2.5 ounces on them, and now they have 5 ounces. Not a big deal. Whatever, let them go. Take the 2.5, whatever, not a big deal. But it still being a Schedule One, now the prosecutors, they want to, and police can look at that as, okay, now that's outside the act, and now that goes back to the way it was before we passed it, and that's a felony, and you can go after them. So we got to fix that. That's the way I look at it, and we don't want to. We don't want to leave any loopholes out there for these guys.
Yeah, and there's CPS issues too, and other things. And what is frustrating, and talk about logical problems. This one, it's hard to even like invoke the human condition and understand why people have internalized these things, and why it's a challenge to deconstruct it and that kind of stuff. This is so blatantly irrational that it's very frustrating, to even talk about. And oftentimes when I've brought it up and mentioned it to people, it was not realized that it was the situation. So Ryan's correct on these consequences that are forthcoming and in the works. If something is not believed to be covered by the newer laws, starting from the MMMA, Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, to the commercial cannabis, both the commercial licenses, if something's not covered under those laws, then it reverts back to the criminal code, which is connected to cannabis being on the state's controlled substances list. And not only it is on there as a Schedule One, it is concurrently, simultaneously on there as a Schedule Two, making it even more absurd and irrational. So, and with the caveat in Schedule Two, when used for medical purposes. So, as Jim Powers on Planet Green Tree said the other day, it does not have any medical purposes until it does. So, it doesn't make any sense. It needs to come off, period. And some of the concern, when lawmakers have gone to the Legislative Services Bureau to say, hey, we want to take it off, there's part of the MCL in that section of law that says this does not pertain to alcohol and some other derivatives of alcohol and perhaps in tobacco and some other examples of tobacco products or whatever. Simply add, cannabis and whatever other component necessary, in that and strike it from everywhere else and done. Now, if there are, in other words, the LSB says it has to stay there because it's relied on to help out with the regulatory scheme of cannabis. That's not a sufficient answer or a justification. So if there are holes left over, voids that need to be filled, then the lawmakers can then make the laws to do that. And when doing that, it can be done without harsh penalties and the felonies and things like that Ryan, pertains to for somebody possibly having more than 5 ounces. So you're allowed to have 2.5 ounces. Up to 5 ounces is a civil infraction. But sometimes if somebody's had more than that, they've slipped into that area of reverting back to as if the laws never changed and getting charged for, intent to deliver and, all the other kind of crap that's, that we're specifically trying to get away from. The intent of the law is to get away from. And in the law, it does specify that these things are supposed to be considered not a big deal, and only like habitual offenders would start getting the harsh penalties and, that kind of thing, which in and of itself could be controversial, but it's interpretation. So in other words, whatever's considered not to be covered by these new laws, it reverts back to the threat of getting felonies, having your kids taken away, whatever. It should just come off. It doesn't make any sense. When John Sinclair's case in 1972, it lifted all laws against cannabis. There was no prohibition on cannabis, period, nothing. And that was for a month or so until the lawmakers got together and put new laws in. And that was the basis for starting Hash Bash, of course, which is coming up, and this year will be the 50th year, the Jubilee. And anyway, going off on a tangent a little bit, but the fact is, it should just come off. And then if there are any voids, the lawmakers put them in place. It's very frustrating that that's not going on. And it's very frustrating when the LSB says stuff like, oh, we have to keep it on, but they're not challenged on it. So there is a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit too, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, Jamie, it's crazy. I've been involved in writing legislation for a number of years now, and you brought this to my attention. What was it, 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Like it's the first time I had heard about us still being on Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. All through the drafting process, it was never even spoke about. Like, I guess in my mind, and I guess in the other minds of the people that we were working with, it was a forgotten thought. It was, we're going to pass legislation, it's going to change everything and take care of it. But apparently that didn't happen. Jamie, what is it? Why do you think this isn't getting the attention that it should? Why is it being drugged down? What's the deal?
Well, conspiratorially, I always think that it's advantageous for maybe some people to keep it there in order for there to be easier enforcement against people.
MSP, you're saying?
To continue. Police, prosecutors, big money interests possibly in the industry who, like the idea of there being a robust enforcement approach to those things that are outside of the, licensed system, which I don't agree with. I think those are some motivating factors. Otherwise, when something really does not make sense, you extrapolate it back to having a reason for benefiting something or somebody, and those are the obvious and traditional things that we deal with. So, I'm not going to prove it here right now, but that's what I kind of believe.
No, you're right. If it doesn't make sense, there's a reason why it doesn't make sense. And it's just a matter of getting down the rabbit hole far enough to figure out who's the one that's benefiting from the fact that we haven't adjusted the law to fall in line with the ballot initiatives and the laws that we had passed previously. A lot of times I feel like it trickles back down to enforcement, like you said, job security. So I think if you go down that rabbit hole far enough, you'll probably find your answer. But that's something we definitely need to address, and I appreciate you bringing it up, Jamie.
Yeah, I've noticed we had a meeting, the Democratic Cannabis Caucus, with a really excellent attorney out of Ann Arbor to help, guide us a little bit with our account and our structure and stuff like that. And I told him about it while we were on the meeting, and it was news to him. He goes, I know, I never thought about that. I was just on this political discussion meeting that is orchestrated by Washtenaw County progressives, and they asked me to come out to talk about the federal descheduling. But I said, can I, talk about what I've been talking about for a long time, which is the state, issue that we've been discussing here now. And I told people about that, and almost everybody on that meeting, there was probably about 14, 16 people, were not aware that that was the case either. So the more we discuss it and people hear about it, like, what the hell, So some people are comfortable within that political world and have their reasons for wanting to keep it like that, with how, logic does not have to be, considered in this decision-making process. And you have to get kind of used to that if you're going to be dealing with, in that world a little bit. But it is frustrating nonetheless. And I think the more people that become aware of it, though, the more chance we'll have of doing something with it. Maybe it'll be after the next elections, possibly. But I think we should get there.
We'll see. Maybe the only thing that seems to be from hearing in Lansing is it's going to be a tough. It's great if you're playing defense for the next 2 years, but if you're trying to get anything done, that's going to be a lot tougher. The attitude there right now, but the one thing that the left and the right seem to be agreeing on is continued government transparency and criminal justice reform. So it's a silver lining. But I wanted to wrap it up today. Everybody's got here some hard outs and a lot of stuff going on in Michigan. Business is picking up. It's awesome, exciting. Looking forward to the year, and want to thank Jamie for being on. At first, let Tom and Kevin kind of give any closing remarks. Kevin over at Truu Cannabis, go ahead.
No, Jamie, I just want to thank you for being on the show again today. It's always a good time when we do have you on the show. You bring up some very, very interesting points that I think that people don't think about all the time. And so glad to have you thinking outside of the box. Glad to have your advocacy, and I wish you the best of luck moving forward, buddy.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Tom, relief.
Jamie, hey, man, thank you so much. Over the years, you've been a great mentor and friend. It's always good to have you on the show. We could probably talk for hours, and we will. You've always been a good ear for advice, or if I needed to rant, and vice versa. So I really appreciate you, and keep fighting the good fight, brother.
Yeah, thank you very much, man. And likewise, and I like being able to have a conversation with you. And Kevin, I'd like to be able to get your perspective on that. I knew that you would be a good person to have that conversation with a few weeks ago, so I appreciate it. And I also appreciate being on a fellow award-winning or highly recognized cannabis-based podcast in
That's
Michigan.
wild.
Yeah, so Jazz Cabbage Cafe, Smoke and Rope, and Bazinga
Very cool.
podcast.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up. You stole my thunder. That's how.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. Okay.
I'm just kidding.
We'll edit this out. This is only live.
Yeah, no.
Momentarily.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say goodbye with, Jamie?
Yeah, obviously Jazz Cabbage Cafe, Tuesdays 4 to 6 live, but it's on all the common podcast formats thereafter. And on Thursday night, Planet Green Trees, there will be the 500th broadcast.
Yeah.
So should be pretty cool. Some clips from some older shows, and some notables will be on, and we'll have some fun.
That's awesome. I think I sent over a video for that. So, everybody, I appreciate Jamie having on the show, back by popular demand. Definitely the audience was demanding a video version with Jamie Lowell. So we listened.
See how many retractions there are now.
Yeah. They want a Rick and Jamie combined show coming up one of these days.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. So no, just always appreciate Jamie being on and thinking back, and big issues with the Schedule 1. Jamie's beating the drum on that, and I think we're going to keep pushing it, and then continue to keep doing this criminal justice reform. And we just makes me kind of thankful, and think about how we were doing this over a decade ago, and we met, and we were like the radicals and like I hear about it now from my family that are getting into cannabis, and they thought I was crazy, nuts. They're being honest with me, and they thank me for sticking with it. So it's fun to see the world come around, and even if there are companies out there, we see that maybe not believe in the criminal justice reform, but it's become a great sales tool and a selling point. So hey, that's the world's changed, and we'll take it. So with that, see everybody next week. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.